Good morning, everybody. We have a great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to over the next 2 hours. So, horns up all the way up to second. We will talk Texas and their big win in Michigan, plus NFL superlative time, baby. Time to hand out awards for things like best looking and most likely to succeed. Very normal. And Golic playoff analysis. We will get into grading college football teams, who's on the up and up, who's going down, all that and more. Charlotte Wilder is here. Let's get into it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here with you guys. We got a great show, everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday here from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Fun one coming up today. As Jesse mentioned, we've got plenty of great college football talk now since my day of mourning for Notre Dame football has come and passed. So now I am mature enough and ready enough to talk about the rest of the sport and what happened this weekend. Plenty to get to also in terms of what we saw yesterday with Tyreek Hill and his detainment prior to the Miami Dolphins win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've now got body cam footage of that interaction between him and law enforcement that we can get into. But we had a football game played last night as well. The San Francisco 49ers go out there and put it on the Jets enthusiastically. And so to help us talk about that, famed Boston/New York sports fan Charlotte Wilder, kind enough to join us now for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday. What's up, Charlotte?
Okay, what are we doing? Why would you put that on it/New York? Okay, so I had fun watching the Knicks once, and now I'm a New York fan. Come on, you don't do that to me, Mike. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. You know, we were texting yesterday, and I was like, I just can't wait to talk about the Jets because we didn't get to do that with Aaron Rodgers last year, except for all the ways that it went wrong. And as I was watching, I was just sort of like, huh? All right. It was sort of more dramatic when he got hurt in the first quarter, and you could be like, oh, what could have been? This could have been the Jets' year, but they were just the Jets anyway. You know, I don't know, Senior. I don't know how you felt, but I was sort of like anticlimactic.
You know, we tried to get to that fourth play, and we had to wait because they went 3 and out on their first drive. So you had to wait till they get to the fourth and the fifth play, which even Joe Buck was making a big deal about, to get past that, over that hump. And, you know, it's early on in every game. It's a feeling out kind of period. We had San Francisco go down and kick a field goal. And after the 3 and out for the Jets did put together a nice touchdown drive. You know, Aaron was not throwing the ball around, was accurate, was Aaron Rodgers that we kind of saw on that drive. And they go up 7-3, and you think, okay, all right, they got a little momentum going. They're on the road. Aaron's kind of looking the part. And that was not only was the last points they got out of the half, but that was the last first down in that drive they got of the half. So it kind of went sideways. The 49ers are a better team, albeit without CMC, though bring in, you know, the often talked about Jordan Mason, backup running back, which we'll get to. But this was about how Aaron looked and how the Jets looked. And quite honestly, Mike, as Aaron is going through his rust, and there was rust, he was off on some shots, and you do wonder, do they have enough talent? They have Garrett Wilson, they have Breece Hall, they got a new O-line they're playing behind. And you need a part of the ball. We always talk about Aaron carrying you, but for this team, their defense needs to carry them. And this defense, they got put on notice by San Francisco by a backup running back going for, 147 yards on 28 carries, and Purdy throwing for over 200 yards by, Shanahan scheming on the offense, motion, he motions, Miami motions, the Rams motion like crazy. So that was the part for me. While everybody was watching Aaron trying to get back to what Aaron's going to be, Mike, it was the defense for me that they can't give up 32 points while the offense is trying to find their way.
You mentioned the 49ers motioned on 62 of 69 plays, the second highest motion rate of any offense in week one. And Dad, this was a Jets defense that was one of the best against the run last year in the NFL,
Yep.
fifth in success rate against the run on defense against the 49ers, who were second in success rate on offense rushing the football. And it showed the fact that they could take Christian McCaffrey, who was announced before the game was going to be inactive, and I had to bow my head in shame because he was dealing with the soft tissue injury that my dad keeps talking about over and over again. Guy loves talking about soft tissue injuries. And Christian McCaffrey went out there and made him right last night, and now we're never going to hear the end of it around here.
It's soft tissue injury. I mean, what can I tell? Aaron Banks had the same thing. He was dealing with that as the left guard for the 49ers. He left in the third quarter.
And don't you feel at least a little bit responsible for now for saying soft tissue injuries so much that these guys went out there and suffered soft tissue injuries?
I'm just bringing the facts. Soft tissue injuries linger. And it's, you know what? And I go back to it. Is Christian McCaffrey too muscular? Is he too muscular? Has he got too much muscle? It strains. The muscle strains. I had fat. Fat doesn't cramp. Fat doesn't pull.
You make a compelling case, Senior. When you say soft tissue injury, you just, forgive me, I'm about to sound real dumb. You just mean stuff that isn't bones. Is that where?
Yes.
Is that where? Okay.
And,
yes.
and things that aren't
sure.
ligaments.
Yeah.
We're not ligaments, Charlotte.
Right,
not like
'cause those are
MCLs,
taut.
ACLs.
Those are soft.
Not like rotator cuffs. We're talking about like
'Cause those are
quad muscles,
taut.
like calf muscles. Yeah.
Here, can I?
You know what?
would
This is a good reminder that sometimes we need to explain these things, because I'm sure Charlotte Wilder is not the only person with that question. So shame on me as the host for not making sure everyone was fully aware of which tissues were soft, which tissues were taut, and which tissues were hard. Or blood, fun fact, is also a tissue. It's plasma.
Yes.
What are we doing here? Let's talk about it.
Yes, thank you. And would you indulge me for a moment? Can I just do my impression of a ligament? And for the audio audience, I'm sorry, but you can check us out on YouTube. This is a ligament. You get it?
What?
This is I'm not going to do a muscle and a bone but it's like stretch taut. This would be an Achilles specifically because of the length. And that's science for you guys. So you're welcome.
That is Dr.
Jesse
Wilder
is
reporting on the
just
news here of the Jets and 49ers game, which is fascinating. And Dad, I think that's part of the reason they are concerned about Christian McCaffrey's calf, is because it was also related, I believe, some Achilles tenderness in the offseason. So being extra cautious with a guy who is a huge part of that offense. But again, I'll say the offense didn't really miss a beat last night for the 49ers. No part of that team missed a beat last night between what they were able to do with Jordan Mason in this game, who, much like Christian McCaffrey, this 49ers offense saw 8-man boxes, so stacked boxes, tons of defenders in them, more than any team in the NFL last year, and was still one of the best rushing against it. And Jordan Mason, who is notably not Christian McCaffrey, still had half of his rushing attempts against loaded boxes and was incredibly successful to the tune of that 28 carries for 147 yards in that game. So that one, Dad, goes to Kyle Shanahan, the play caller, obviously. All of that motion you talk about, all the different things and little machinations we saw that'll be gone over with a fine-tooth comb by Phil Twitter in the next couple of days, helped allow them to get small advantages in there. And then the offensive line, led by Trent Williams, who, oh, by the way, held out. We talked about all the holdouts in this game between Brandon Ayuk, who really didn't have much of a game, only 2 receptions in this game, coming off that holdout about his contract. Trent Williams comes back, per Next Gen Stats, after 2 months of holding out as a 36-year-old starting left tackle, and not only helps lead a rushing attack that does that on the ground, but in 33 pass blocking reps, gives up 0 pressures and 0 sacks, and still reminds everybody who Daddy is.
He has to be everybody's hero. Everybody's hero to hold out for the entire camp, get paid, and the holdout worked. He got paid, just steps in and doesn't miss a beat. And he's got to go every play. Brandon Ayuk, it's not a pass every play, though he has to block on run blocks, but it's not as intense as Trent Williams. Every play, he's either pass blocking somebody or run blocking somebody, and he absolutely got it done. And listen, San Fran controlled the ball. They had 24 first down to the Jets 14. You talk about Mason's 28 carries. That was the most carries in the regular season by a San Francisco running back in 13 seasons. So they just don't feed a running back, or they haven't, to this tune. They controlled the ball. They had 70 plays. The Jets had 49. They controlled the ball for over almost 39 minutes. The Jets controlled it for a little over 21 minutes. So just an absolute control of the ball. After the Jets' first touchdown, it was just the 49ers just slowly rolling and it was really the end of the half and the beginning of the third quarter. Right? So the end of the half, or going to the end of the half, it's 13-7. It's a one-score game. And the 49ers go on a 12-play, 75-yard drive and end the half with a field goal. And all the Jets get is a kneel down after that. And then the 49ers start with the ball in the third quarter and go on an 11-play, 70-yard drive. So it was 13-7 before those back-to-back drives. We call it the twofer, the 2-for-1. You get the drive before the half, and then you get the ball in the third quarter, and you start the third quarter. They got the twofer, and they went from 13-7 to 23-7 and ball game.
Yep, it was a massive swing. It's the one all teams chase, and it was just one of many reasons why the 49ers went out and checked the box. The 49ers are expected to win a Super Bowl this season, and they did. George Kittle was on with Van Pelt after and said, hey, with Christian McCaffrey out, we couldn't do a lot of the downfield cute stuff that we do, putting him out in routes, but we still go out there and run it through a bleeper's face. So they went out and checked the box. They looked like the Super Bowl contender and favorite that everybody assumes them to be. On the other side, Jesse, let's tap in with Aaron Rodgers and these New York Jets to see his response coming off this one.
Yeah, Aaron Egypt Rodgers back on the field for the first time since the opener last year, the infamous moment that he went down. So here he is on how he felt. Reminder, he's 40 years old physically.
Yeah, it's been a while. I felt great. A lot of gratitude just to be back in pads. So many people helped me get to this spot. So I'm really thankful for, my surgeon, my PTs, my loved ones, my friends, the staff here, training staff to help me get back was really cool. Obviously wanted to, take a shot and feel, the physicality of it. Once I, threw a couple balls and took a shot, I felt good. Felt like I was into the game.
All right, guys, so reminder, Jets had the ball for only 21 minutes, 20 seconds, the lowest time of possession by a Rodgers-led team in any start of his career. So obviously he looked a little rusty, and they didn't exactly give him the time to knock off said rust. So, he said he felt pretty good. He looked pretty good.
Yeah, Dad, we acknowledge. Tough first test. The 49ers, especially in this game, were able to get pressure on him without sending blitzers. It was a lot of four-man rush that you'd expect, especially Leonard Floyd having the kind of night he did, trying to come back and be the boogeyman for Aaron Rodgers. But I looked at it, and it was It was weird. It was one of those moments. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is a lot of things to a lot of people at this point, but in a football sense, he was the original Patrick Mahomes in my lifetime. The things that he did, extending plays, moving around, using his legs, making these incredible throws, was the original quarterback that captivated us, I think, in the way, at least in my lifetime, that Patrick Mahomes does now. And last night you saw that man is gone, at least right now. Now, him coming back looked like there was a very real clock in his head. And he's always been a guy that can get it out quick. But last night you saw, whether it was that fourth play where he did get there and dumped it off quickly to Breece Hall, the minute pressure showed up, you could see when things got near Aaron Rodgers in the pocket, he was not a guy looking to extend the play and make a big play. He looked like a guy that didn't want to get hurt again, at least in the beginning, which is understandable. But for a guy that we talked about almost coming back at the end of last season or trying to, and now just automatically assuming that things are going to be good, we saw a very different player, Charlotte, where one of those things that was the hallmark of his game, it might get to a point where he's more comfortable later in the season, but between the injury itself and the fact, like Jesse said, he is a guy that's the oldest player in the league right now at his position, I think we're seeing, all right, we're going to watch a guy kind of morph his game differently the same way we've seen Tiger Woods morph his game differently in golf or any other professional athlete has to deal with late in their career.
Yeah, I mean, there's no saying that he won't get back to some form of that or of what he was. I think you're right that maybe fear is playing a little bit more of a role here than it had in the past, which I completely would understand because, you know, he had evidence of what happens when something goes wrong last year, and it's hard to come back from that. I think there's something, use the word jarring, Mike. There's something for me seeing Aaron Rodgers with his sort of graying beard and, you know, more tired eyes than they used to be under the helmet. That's like, oh man, this isn't the same person we have watched. And I mean, I think that's the hardest thing for an athlete, right? And someone who has been as great as Aaron Rodgers has been to let that go. And I think that all of us are a little more primed to believe it's possible because we saw Tom Brady do wild things when at the point that he was still playing, he did look like a father dressed up with his son to go trick-or-treating as football players because you're just not used to seeing someone who looks like that on the field in a uniform. Aaron Rodgers might be approaching that. Who's to say he can't, you know, turn it around and do some very impressive stuff? But we are at a point where it's like maybe, well, I don't know.
And his game is also a lot more predicated on that, Dad, than Tom's was. Tom was never a guy that moved around. And so Aaron Rodgers potentially transitioning to being more, if not almost exclusively a pocket passer would be a big departure.
Age can take away your arm strength and your mobility. And quite honestly, Tom Brady, the GOAT, never really had a lot of that, right? He was never really mobile and he didn't have the strongest arm in the world. So he just kept going. He just kept going until 43, 44 with the way he played. For Aaron, Mike, you're right. That part of the game, at least now maybe he'll gradually build it back. He was the guy on the run. He was the Patrick Mahomes. He was inventing plays outside of the pocket. And it looked like he just wanted to get rid of the ball when he was in the pocket. And maybe that will come with confidence. Again, this was the first game that he was going 100% since he tore his Achilles. And it's maybe going to take, you know, a beat to get back to it if he can, if he does. And we don't know if he's going to. He did pull the classic Aaron Rodgers touchdown pass on an offside free play that he's so, I mean, this dude, he makes D linemen, I mean, just stay on your knee until the end of the play clock because he takes it down to the end of the play clock all the time. And when he doesn't, he'll hard count you. He gets, I think it was Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd, by the way, had the sack of Aaron Rodgers, the one sack. That was ironic. But yeah, got Leonard Floyd to jump and throws a 37-yard touchdown pass to Alan Lazard to make it, I think, 26-13. So that part of Aaron is still around.
That felt delightfully nostalgic there as they popped during the graphic. Overwhelmingly, no player active or no player all time has even close to as many of those touchdowns in that circumstances, drawing guys off sides as Aaron Rodgers does. It's one of the hallmarks of his game. And again, say what you want about the guy. It felt good in a football sense to see that back again, especially at the start of the season here. Couple of housekeeping elements here. Felt bad on Jordan Mason's starring night that he appeared to get caught up in a little bit of news controversy around Christian McCaffrey's health. He got asked by Lisa Salters after the game when he found out he was going to start. He was very unsure and said, maybe I think Friday. It's right after a game, so you take it with a grain of salt, but everyone pointed out Christian McCaffrey was listed as questionable up until Saturday. And so now Kyle Shanahan got asked about that after the game. He said that that's not true what Jordan Mason said. And you saw Jordan in his press conference after the game, dejected, having to deal with all of that. So hopefully that gets ironed out. Again, it was after a game. I'm sure he wasn't totally sure. The 49ers personnel probably should have had that more buttoned up so he had the right answer, anticipating this being a problem. But now, Dad, we look at the reaction coming off of this game, and the Jets have now moved down. They were the odds-on favorite to win the division. They have now moved back to third behind the Bills and the Miami Dolphins, which is probably where they should have been this entire time. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Charlotte Wilder, Jesse Cofield. Yesterday, we talked about on Sunday, one of the more bizarre scenes of the opening slate of NFL games. Tyreek Hill, star wide receiver from the Miami Dolphins, detained before their game by Miami police. And still able to make it to the game. Fortunately, he was released. Jonnu Smith, the tight end for Miami Dolphins, along with Calais Campbell, the defensive lineman, had gone to check on him as well. Calais Campbell had been briefly detained, and the Miami Dolphins still go back out there. Tyreek still leads the team in receiving yards and helps them to a win. But today, or yesterday, I should say, the body cam footage was released of that interaction where, again, Hill received citations for careless driving and a seatbelt violation, and Calais Campbell was also briefly detained. The footage shows that Hill is originally pulled over for speeding while approaching Hard Rock Stadium. It takes approximately 1 minute from when the officer leaves his motorcycle and starts walking to the car before Hill is forcefully pulled out. Now, in the back and forth we see, they go up to his car, they tap on his window. Tyreek Hill, a bit agitated, says, listen, I gave you my license. Can you do whatever you're going to have to do? I'm on the verge of being late for this game. And then immediately after that, the cops see red, pull him out of the car, and begin to forcibly push him onto the ground. You see when Calais and Jonnu show up later on, they're shouted down quickly by these police officers in this situation. So, Dad, Charlotte, I look at this situation, and we saw yesterday when they came out and said, hey, the Miami Police Department was already investigating this. An officer had already been, suspended at that time while the investigation went on internally. That was kind of the canary in the coal mine that something here probably was not above board. And this looked like a situation where, yes, listen, was Tyreek Hill the most cordial with the police officer at the beginning? No, but as Jesse said yesterday, arguing with a police officer, or at least being slightly rude to a police officer, is not grounds to be manhandled the way that Tyreek Hill was. There's no reason to escalate things the way that they did, and I have to imagine Tyreek Hill and his legal team are going to have plenty to work with that in this situation, as now this is out for the public to see.
Yeah, was he the best responsive? No, he was not. Just kept repeating, don't tap on my glass, don't tap on my glass, don't tap on my glass. But he did give him his license and registration, and he rolled the window back up, and he said he did that because he didn't want to draw attention as people were, again, there were fans literally walking by this going on. He said he didn't want, whether that's true or not, whatever. And the cop kept tapping on the window, and he rolled the window down a little bit to talk to the officer. And that officer, you could tell when blank started hitting the fan, wanted nothing to do with what went on. There was another officer, his fuse got lit by Tyreek, again, not rolling the window down and talking about don't tap on the window. His fuse got lit. He opens a door. He rips Tyreek out, and now the other cops have to join in and help because the one cop started it. But you could tell that one of the cops wanted no part. And this was one guy, and then the other police officers kind of fed off it. But it was really the one guy who just kind of lost it, Charlotte. I mean, he just like basically had enough of Tyreek and Tyreek's comments and basically said, I'm going to pull the move here, and we're going to where they're supposed to de-escalate the situation. This officer escalated the situation.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately unsurprising given the history of policing in this country, especially when it comes to Black people. And Tyreek said after, imagine if I wasn't Tyreek Hill. And this footage is horrifying. I mean, he has his knee on his back. They're handcuffing him, and I think it is very important to say, like, Tyreek was also saying, well, he said, don't tap on my glass. He was also saying, do what you got to do. He was like, do your job, like rolled his window up, because this was the reason players could stop by was because it was so close to the stadium. It wasn't like he called them and said, come see me, I am being harassed by the police. It was because they were on their way to the game and they saw this happening. And so the audacity of the cops to go on this power trip and see this as an opportunity to be like, okay, this is my moment and I am going to do something completely out of line and violent to this person, is what we all saw in those clips that originally came out. We didn't know what had led to it or what that whole interaction was. I think the body cam footage just really cemented that. And to me, it was also just like really upsetting seeing Calais Campbell on the side of the road, saying, I'm leaving, and the cops threatening him the way that they were. And I think it's just really important to reiterate that saying what Jesse said yesterday is that saying what Tyreek said, don't tap on the glass and then rolling your window up is not a reason that a police officer should ever yank someone from his car and then handcuff them, so I don't know. I really hope that there is resolution to this. I think it can be very hard for in any legal action to actually for law enforcement to be held accountable. And I hope it's different here, Mike.
Yeah, well, one of the things that is at least different here or encouraging was the Miami Dolphins put out a lengthy statement in full support of Tyreek Hill, their player, and Mike McDaniel also in front of the podium the other day got pretty emotional talking about the experience of his multiple players out on the scene of this. Take a listen.
It's been hard for me not to find myself more upset the more I think about it. And that's because of, my teammates and trying to put myself in that emotion or in that situation that they've described emotionally. And then knowing more than that, I think the thing that me up, honestly, to be quite frank, is knowing that I don't know what that feels like.
So Mike McDaniel there obviously saw how shook up his players were. Seeing that footage now crystallizes it in a way that does make it really difficult, especially for those of us that have not had this happen to them at the hands of law enforcement or wouldn't necessarily feel like they would be put in this same situation.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, the Miami Police Department already putting one of the officers, and I think we know which officer, on administrative leave, I think kind of tells the story that this one officer got overly aggressive. Again, as I put it, his fuse got lit and went off because Tyreek wasn't verbally cooperating the way that they wanted him to. And again, while that certainly doesn't warrant being ripped out of the car, it's just a shame that it escalated to that. What should have been a routine stop of even though Tyreek wasn't verbally very cooperative, he did give the information to the officers, his license, his registration. He said, "Do what you got to do. Basically go write the ticket. I have to go." And the one officer really started it all, and then the Calais Campbell thing as well. I mean, you. At times you have to look at it from the officer's side too and say, wait, there are more people coming on the scene. We have to keep this under control. You get it to a point of trying to keep it under control when there are now more people involved. But again, it seemed to go a little far with Calais as he was walking back to his car.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like there was a shortage of cops there. It wasn't one officer with all of these players surrounding him. It was 3 players and a whole cavalry of officers there. And to your point again, the job there is to keep the situation under control. And instead, they made it unnecessarily combative at almost every point during this instance and altercation. I can't even call it an altercation during this traffic stop that occurred for Tyreek Hill. So, again, would imagine a lot more legally will come out of this. The NFL's response will be interesting also. I saw Chris Canty talking about this on Unsportsmanlike over at ESPN. What the NFL does to back one of its players who was harassed in this instance, it appears, based on what we've seen, by law enforcement in that spot. So that is going to be an interesting response for the NFL in this case here. Guys, the NFL also is going to have something pretty dire on its hands with what's now come out again about DeShaun Watson. As on Monday, DeShaun Watson was sued in Houston for sexual assault and battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. In the lawsuit filed Monday in Harris County, Texas, a woman said that Watson aggressively sexually assaulted her in October of 2020 when he played for the Houston Texans. The woman, who is not a massage therapist, said he forcibly penetrated her after she declined to massage his buttocks. So, according to the lawsuit, Watson went to the woman's apartment for what was supposed to be a dinner date, removed his clothes while she was in another room getting ready, demanded a massage according to the civil complaint, and when she did not, complainant said he positioned her in the bed next to him, partially undressed her, and began to, quote, roughly penetrate her for several minutes. So obviously, listen, apologize to anyone. This is triggering, and we should have said that beforehand. So certainly this is always very sensitive subject matter when it comes to accusations and allegations of sexual assault. But Charlotte, this coming for a man who was already suspended for 11 games after incidents involving 23 or 24, I believe, civil lawsuits of sexual assault allegations, sexual misconduct allegations, before his tenure with the Browns began with the Houston Texans. And so there's a lot to unpack with this. The NFL, who, as a part of his punishment last time around, Watson was fined $5 million, suspended 11 games. And there was also a clause in there that said he would not be subject to any further punishment of the league for accusations arising from, quote, the same or substantially similar conduct that happened with the previous investigation. He could be investigated and further penalized, though, for any previous incident that involved the use or threat of physical force or was charged criminally. And so, Charlotte, that line in particular leads me to believe that the NFL does absolutely have reason and grounds to not only investigate this, but punish if they see fit.
I mean, yes, definitely. Given the language that was used in this woman's allegations, it's horrifying. And I encourage everyone to go read Jenny Vrentis's work at the New York Times. She followed all of these lawsuits in 2021. I believe was the majority of when this was happening, and she wrote the follow up and flagged that clause, Mike. And I think the NFL can be very good at doing somersaults to find ways to keep players who are deemed valuable on the field. And I really hope that this is not, I really hope that this is different, and some concrete action is taken, because the allegations here are just, deeply horrific to read and hear.
Well, I mean, we know the NFL has not had a great history in dealing with players in sexual assault. I mean, they do not have a great history, and they're certainly say they're trying to get better at it. And the $5 million fine and 11-game suspension to DeShaun Watson, some thought it was too much, some didn't think it was enough. And that's always going to happen. That's always going to happen. You're going to have people on both sides. Statute of limitations for personal injury cases, 2 years, and this was in 2020. But in cases of expressly alleged sexual assault, it's 5 years. So this certainly falls under that purview. The young lady has the same representative, Tony Busby, who represented many others who sued Watson in 2021. And I mean, it just brings up everything again about DeShaun Watson and how the Haslam signed him to that deal. All the other owners were ticked that they signed him to a guaranteed money deal. On the football side of it, there were fans that were upset that you bring in somebody who was punished for sexual assault, and now here it is again. It's just and to throw in, let's be honest, you got to throw in the football side of it. He's not playing well. So, I mean, because there are fans that will say, we don't like what he did, but he's a quarterback of our team. We want him to win. So everything kind of gets thrown into the blender here. But the most important part, obviously, was a young lady who says she was sexually assaulted, and where this goes from here.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference between this latest case is Watson is specifically accused of sexual assault in this particular case. And so now we do wait and see how it plays out. And Dad, like you said, it's a shame that the football is going to get talked about at all in this, but there are people that are going to look at this situation and say, is it more likely now that we see him punished because of that? When in actuality, remember the NFL, when they suspended him for 11 games, it was their internal investigation where they said they found enough credible evidence in the 4 or 5 cases that they looked at in particular for that to find him guilty enough to suspend, according to the NFL. So with that already as the background on this warrants serious consideration about what DeShaun Watson's football future should look like at all around the NFL, which again, as these allegations go forward and we hear more about this, if it progresses that way, this is someone whose time in football should be coming closer and closer to an end if these allegations once again prove true in the NFL's view of this.
to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Charlotte Wilder here today. Guys, we are on to week 2 in the NFL, but not before we hand out some week 1 superlatives. So let's get into it. Which team, you guys, is America's sweetheart right now? The best looking, if you will.
Charlotte, I know you've got something pounding in your chest right now for your team back home, and I'm not talking about your New York team. So who do you want to start with here for best looking?
We're gonna have an offline conversation about this whole narrative, Mike. Look, I'm not gonna say the Patriots are best looking in general. They are most surprising looking. They are the ones who come back from summer vacation as suddenly a junior, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, did you completely glow up over the summer? Because I was impressed with the defense. I was impressed that Jacoby Brissett could execute the game plan to run the ball and didn't mess it up. And I was mostly impressed by that moment that I think went fairly viral after the game, where Jacoby Brissett said he cried 3 times, one of which when Gerard Mayo, before the game started, came up to him and was laughing as he said, hey man, you're about to go win us this game. And like, I almost get emotional thinking about it, because I think as a Patriots fan for so many years with this, like, do your job. We don't have feelings. We just go win. To see that kind of humanity come out of that locker room, and to see players, especially the quarterback, be so open about it, it was just like a really lovely breath of fresh air. And I think not having high expectations for them to go on the road and get a win was pretty good looking, Mike. I really liked it.
It was. No, it's been a market departure. Yeah. Everyone from Patriot Media we've talked to, Charlotte, has echoed similar thoughts about dealing with the team and getting real answers from the coach, and it not being as cryptic and secretive and all the things that we normally associated with Patriot football. So, again, to get a win too, who knows how many they'll have. I still don't know if this is a Patriots team where the top-end performance is going to have them in contention for anything meaningful. But to come out and do that to the Bengals week 1 in a season that already, Dad, felt like it had been written off for them as this prelude to whenever Drake May takes over is noteworthy. You're allowed to have fun and enjoy these moments, Patriots fans. And as Charlotte pointed out here, that also extends to the players now under Gerard Mayo.
Yeah, they definitely should get votes for best looking for the weekend. There's a few you could go with. San Francisco looking like a Super Bowl team, but I expect them, to be at or near that again. New Orleans in there, but it was Carolina who they whooped up on. Yeah, I'm going to go with a team that I thought would take a step back and really played well, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. Going to Cleveland, and against that Cleveland defense, they played extremely well. Better than I thought the Cleveland defense would show a little bit better in this. So I give Dallas credit. To me, they were, because of the way I thought their season would go, to me, Mike, they were most impressive.
Yeah, no, listen, I enjoy feeling vindicated when I see the team that I went out and tried to stake my reputation on with you go, at least in week 1. And Dak Prescott's coasting off the high of getting $60 million a year. And that defense looked like a weapon against a Browns team that we know is dealing with banged up offensive tackles and a quarterback that's a shell of himself. So, Charlotte, I feel pretty good about that one. Though Philly and Dallas, quite frankly, the NFC East upper crust showed themselves to be just that this weekend.
Yeah, no, and I want to say that I firmly had your back on that. And Senior, I think you told me that we were both nuts, but I feel vindicated too. I also think that the upper crust and the lower crust are separated by about an Earth's width, because I'm sure we'll get to it, but man, the Giants, woof, I'm not a New York fan.
Yeah, no, I could say distance yourself from that one, Charlotte. At least being a Jets fan at this point, it was respectable the way they went out.
Yeah, I also think, we talked the last week when I was on, Mike, about the bottom teams and how the Patriots and the Giants were both in there. And I'm going to be honest, I was more expecting the Patriots viewing experience to be not what the Giants was, because that was like a massive, massive train wreck. But I think I was like, oh, this is sort of fun. And I was excited and I was surprised. And then the Giants, my poor husband, he was like, he said, we were watching yesterday, the Jets game, and I was like, wow, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really look like himself anymore. And he just looks at me, he was like, I would take Aaron Rodgers. I would take literally anybody but Daniel Jones. So I think, Giants fans are really going through it.
We got a reminder of how the other half lives this weekend for a lot of teams. For my best looking, that's why I'll give some love right now to the New Orleans Saints. I don't know what it's going to look on the high end, but again, in that division, both them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers showed themselves to be teams that could go out there and put it together pretty well in this game. 47-10. Again, a lot more of that is the Panthers than it is the Saints, but Derek Carr unloading early on there to Rashid Shaheed. That deep ball on display again. Alvin Kamara got lathered up. This is an offense that I said, unfortunately, is not one I'm inclined to seek out because of the way it operates, but they went out in the very least, put up some points, made it look good in week one, and so they've been a team we talked about with Aaron Schatz from FTN, could potentially win this division in this season. So good for them to start off the season on a strong note there. We will see if they can continue that. Dad, let's go to most likely to succeed. A bunch of wide receivers that maybe underperformed, especially the young guys in week one. Who do you think has the best chance to bounce back as we go forward here?
Well, you look at the top receivers in the draft, and Marvin Harrison had one catch, was only targeted, 2 or 3 times. Rome Odunze had one catch, but now he's week to week with an injury. And then Malik Neighbors. I know there's others, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, but I think Malik Neighbors on a team that is going to stink and a quarterback that's probably on his last legs with the Giants, Malik Neighbors is going to get his. Basically because they don't have a lot else to throw to. I know Wan'Dale Robinson led in receptions with 6, but Malik Neighbors averaged over 13 yards a catch, had 7 targets, had 5 receptions. I think he is going to get his share, and I think of the top receivers. And remember, the wide receivers are reliant on the quarterbacks getting it to him. So from that case, you would think, well, okay, Kyler Murray is the one who's most experienced out of the quarterbacks. You have Caleb Williams, who really struggled in week one, just getting it to any receiver. So, Charlotte, I think Malik Neighbors is going, while this team is going to not be good, he is going to get his share of catches.
Yeah, I like that senior. I think I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy. I think what he did in that Chiefs game was absolutely stunning for a rookie. I mean, I forgot he was a rookie. I felt like he had been on that team. It seemed like he and Mahomes had this chemistry that was something that develops over at least 3 seasons. And I know that Mahomes had liked him from the beginning, and he told the Chiefs GM, this guy's great. He also, Worthy ran a 4.21 on the 40 at the combine. That I believe that's a record. And you could see it. You could just see this beautiful competence out there on the field. And I think that this guy is going to be a big, big part of however high the Chiefs go this year, which I feel like, sorry to 49ers fans, I think they might break your heart again.
He's got the best position of that group because he will be expected to do the least. They were able to use him on gadget plays, on the end around, on double moves, and he's got the best quarterback throwing to him of anyone of this bunch. So a great pick there. The speed shows up. We see a lot of times testing numbers maybe don't always look the same on tape. When he took that end around, we all went, oh, and sat up in our chairs because that 4.21 showed in pads on the field and gives us a lot to get excited about in the future. Dad, you kind of made the argument for me there. I'll bet Marvin Harrison Jr. in the long run. Now, he was my offensive rookie of the year pick, so I better back him, but I do think that quarterback play is going to matter. Buffalo, it took a while to get their feet under them, but that's still one of the best teams in the AFC. They were on the road, and so I can understand 3 targets and 1 reception there. I don't think is going to happen that much more often as they go forward with Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'll bet on him in the long run, and I'll say that this was a blip and not the beginning of a trend or pattern for who I think is the best young wide receiver in the NFL from this rookie class, even though Malik Neighbors did have a solid week 1 in a losing effort for the Giants. Speaking of losing efforts, guys, the first team to score an offensive touchdown this season, the Giants, Bears, and Steelers both put up a whopping goose egg on offense in terms of actually getting into the end zone this last weekend. So, Dad, who among that group do you think actually has the best chance of finally seeing their offense hit pay dirt this week?
Well, they all have a good chance. The Giants play Washington, Pittsburgh plays Denver, and Chicago plays Houston. So, I mean, they all certainly should
Does Chicago
score.
have a good chance against Houston? That's a pretty good defense.
Houston is a good defense. We have a 1-game, sample size this season. They gave up a little over 300 yards.
The bones of that Houston defense are good.
Oh, yeah. Chicago, I guess you would say, barring or excluding the quarterback who did not play well, probably has the most offensive weapons, right? Between the receivers. Now, Rome Odunze is week to week. Keenan Allen did drop the touchdown pass, but you have DeAndre Swift in the backfield as well. But the quarterback certainly struggled. I'll probably go with Pittsburgh. I think I would go with Pittsburgh facing Denver. That they'll get it, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. We're not going to know. Mike Tomlin said, "Talk to me Tuesday." As far as when he's going to name a starter, he's got to just be loving the fact that this is going to be a friggin' week-to-week thing, as much as Tomlin likes to talk. But I say Pittsburgh.
No, Dad, I'm with you on that one. Russell Wilson revenge game. Going back to the place that put basically his career careening off a cliff based on the experience with him and Nathaniel Hackett there that was tried to be reclaimed by Sean Payton. I would absolutely bet them. I think the Broncos are the defense most willing to give that up. And I will be interested to see if Russell Wilson works extra hard. Russell Wilson, Charlotte, who, by the way, even though he was inactive this last week, still in full pads on the sideline as one of the most Russell Wilson things humanly possible.
That's what I was going to say, Mike. I was going to say the fact that he was on the sideline in pads when he was not playing makes me think that he will not be able to execute the revenge game that you might think he should be able to execute. I just don't see it happening. I think I think Caleb Williams is going to have a game that most people thought he was capable of. The way Bears fans were mad at him after that win was just great. Wait, they won, right? They did.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I just had a momentary... and in your head, you're like, oh my God, is that no? So the fact that Bears fans were like, well, this guy is not good, I think might be the fire that he needs to, because I think he's capable. I think of all these teams, I think the Bears are going to have a chance to get it into the end zone, not on a block punt or a pick six. Which is sort of a beautiful way to win a game, by the way.
The most talent that they have potentially to break out there. The Steelers, you'd probably be reliant on one of your running backs and Najee Harris or company breaking a long run, or George Pickens making one of those great acrobatic sideline plays. I guess the Giants have Malik Neighbors who could pop off at any time, but the Bears' arsenal definitely feels the most stocked. It's just going up against a Houston team that can especially make that offensive line that we're still waiting to see consistently in front of Caleb look a little bit more suspect. Houston definitely has the most in that regard. But we're talking about teams. Let's talk about individual players now. Dad, still shaking off the rust. Who had the worst return of opening weekend for some of the players we saw coming back off injury?
Well, I mean, I think Kirk Cousins would lead that list. He had 2 interceptions, was sacked twice, but he just didn't. Why I think he has the ability to shake off the rust sooner is he didn't get a chance to work with a lot of that offensive talent in the preseason. And so it's going to take, certainly through this first game, which we saw, they just didn't barely put up any points. But I think he has a high ceiling of shaking the rust off because of the talent that they have on that offense. So I would say Kirk Cousins. I was a little surprised, but I guess not too surprised knowing that they didn't work together in the preseason a lot.
Charlotte, what about you?
I'm going to go with Tom Brady because everybody's ragging on this guy and he's shaking off the rust. I think it is especially hard to reconcile the fact that here's a guy who's never done this before, and Greg Olsen, who is unbelievably good at his job, was sacrificed for it. His voice sounded different from how I expected it to sound on the broadcast, to be honest. And I think that the one thing I will say is the first time you do anything on camera or host anything is terrifying, no matter who you are. And I think that he has a chance to be very good at this. I think that I think fans can sometimes forget or not having the experience of doing this on camera, that the first time you do it, you're probably going to be bad. So he's shaking off the rust. I think his ceiling, I think he could be good at this, Mike.
This is like well over my 10,000th hour of this, and I'm still bad at it a lot. So, yeah, he's going to be fine.
Hard.
I have a feeling.
It's really hard.
Shake it off, Tommy. Shake it off. Charlotte Wilder, check her out as the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, wherever you get your podcast, and every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network. Charlotte, we appreciate you, pal. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, guys.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We saw the body cam footage of Tyreek Hill on Sunday. He was cited with careless driving and a seatbelt violation and was detained and released. Despite all that, Hill caught an 80-yard touchdown catch and helped to make DraftKings customers some cash. He was the third biggest moneymaker on Sunday. The Dolphins will be back at it on Thursday as they host Buffalo for Thursday night football. Pretty cool. Right now, the Dolphins are 2.5-point favorites. The Bills' chances for a division road win could be hampered by Josh Allen's hand, okay? So, Josh Allen's hand, he injured it after his second touchdown rush in the Bills' comeback win against the Cardinals, but full participant on Monday. Looks like the x-rays are all clear, so Allen should be good to go. Coming up, heading back to school, we'll do a full breakdown of college football from the weekend. Coming up on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. in Texas has a lot to celebrate, guys. Horns up all the way to second in the AP poll after a huge win. Tennessee up to 7. Oregon keeps falling to 9. The SEC, unsurprisingly, has 6 of the top 7 teams in the AP poll, obviously because it just means more. But last week was all about the Longhorns, just absolute domination on the road. Texas up to plus 500 to win the championship. And in the last 48 hours, okay, Texas has taken 32% of the handle, 25% of the bets, all the title bets. Is it time to buy Texas, fellas? How do we feel about this situation?
Yeah, the time to buy Texas is probably a while ago because after this one, Dad, they're not going to sneak up on anybody. And how cool that with the scheduling this season. Now, I understand the, slow erosion of regional conferences that has happened is a net negative for the sport in my mind. I will firmly stand by that. I think wearing away at that foundation will ultimately be something that has negative effects that we can't see at this point. But I will say one of the upsides and the reason that you had all of this conference realignment is the fact that now we're going to get 1 versus 2, at least if it holds serve between now and then, on November 19th, or October 19th, I should say. Georgia and Texas are going to play in the regular season. 2 teams that both legitimately have a chance to win a national championship. And right now, Dad, own the 2 best wins in the sport. Georgia opening weekend against Clemson, boat racing them, and Texas now going on the road, a true road game at the Big House, and putting it on them. Steve Sarkisian, for my money, the best play caller in the sport right now, and Quinn Ewers, a guy that absolutely should be at or near the front of the Heisman Trophy conversation. Him, Carson Beck, Ashton Genty from Boise State, all putting on marquee performances here. So I am as impressed as you could be with the Texas team that basically replaced every meaningful offensive weapon outside of the quarterback from last season.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with them. I mean, they just keep turning over talent. And while their win, I mean, I was stunned that the spread was only, 7.5? I was stunned that it was only that. I figured they were going to be double digits. Hell, our buddy Jason Fitz said it was going to be 20 points, but I think it ended up being 19 points. I mean, this was expected, quite honestly. I know it was at the Big House, and I know it was against the defending national champs, but it is such a new team for Michigan. But you bring up what may happen now with the 12-team playoff. You may get 2 teams, and in this case, 2 of the best teams in the country, playing 3 times. Playing in the regular season, playing for the conference championship, and then playing in the playoffs. So that is a distinct possibility. And they definitely deserve to be number 2. I basically think it's Georgia, Texas, then a bit of a drop-off to Ohio State, and then a drop-off to Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee. I think these 2 teams at the top, Georgia and Texas, are just in a separate category.
Well, and it's in terms of what we've seen, right? You can only go with what your schedule's given you. And Texas and Georgia have both had chances to play those teams. For Ohio State, it's been Akron and Western Michigan right now, and that's not going to improve probably until, again, around that time when Georgia and Texas play. They'll have a stretch. Ohio State, we're starting October 5th. They play Iowa, then on the road at number 9, Oregon, home versus Nebraska, and on the road in Happy Valley against a top 10 Penn State team. That stretch was going to be where Ohio State will have a chance to either push forward and say, we are the best team in the country, or we're going to be a step behind those teams. They've got the talent. We know about the roster, but only Texas and Georgia have been able to do that against teams that we trust. Like, hey, Michigan offensively, that's got to be a work in progress for them. Their quarterback, Davis Warren, really struggling again in critical downs and distances. When you look at 3rd and obvious, where you know he's got to throw the ball, just never looked comfortable with it. But that defense for Michigan, blue chip stock, and Texas went out there, and even with the offensive imbalance for Michigan, still straight up was moving the ball almost however they want to. So, tons of confidence in this Texas team. I'm with you. I think Ty still goes to the runner. Georgia's wasn't a true road win, but I do think Clemson, more capable quarterback in Cade Klubnik right now than what Michigan's dealing with Davis Warren, who people were surprised even won that job coming out of camp. But outside of that, yes, they've proven the most. Ohio State, I think, is still in range because of the talent on that roster. And then, Dad, as you keep going down the new AP Top 25 poll, it gets interesting. Penn State, really close win against Bowling Green that people maybe didn't expect and see coming. Oregon, now 2 weeks in a row, really underwhelming in terms of their performance against some teams that are in conferences outside of that. We can get to them more in a bit, but it's an early season where, Dad, we know this is Notre Dame fans. The job is to survive in advance, and a team like the Fighting Irish did not do that. For everybody else, I think you'll largely be able to excuse away a lot of these early season close dust-ups because you're coming off a training camp, you're still learning a lot about this roster, and you're having to deal with that mental focus required to go through an out-of-conference slate that sometimes has helmets that aren't going to excite you as much as the teams you're looking forward to in conference play.
Yeah, that's why as I was sitting at the Notre Dame game and when they went up 14-13, I'm just like, even if it's a 1-point win, just survive in advance. Just make it a win, and you'll look back on it and say it was a win. That's all that mattered, because there were other big teams against smaller teams where the scores were close, but they weren't able to do it. And they fall, rightfully so, to 18, right behind Michigan and right in front of Louisville. So they didn't take care of business now. And it's still a long season to go, but that's one that you should have that you didn't have. And that's why teams are at the top, because they took care of their business.
We'll get to them in a second as we hand out some grades coming off the weekend. But, Jesse, I do want to get to the other game that was supposed to be the captivating matchup of the weekend, at least in terms of the history of these two teams, the rivalry there, but also what happened last season in Colorado and Nebraska that went about how we all expected.
Yeah, the Cornhuskers handed Colorado their first L of the season, and Deion Sanders was not too happy afterwards.
Do a better job offensively on protection, as well as trying to figure out how to establish a run game and be consistent with that. Seemed like we just never got it going until it was too late. Seemed like we just never got it going. Protections were a problem. I'm trying to be polite and say it.
How many times did Raul get touched? There was able, like, of course, whenever you're able to run the ball consistently and whenever you're able to, then that opens up the pass, But it's just like you got to understand, like, what your team good at. So it's like, why would we keep running the ball if, okay, we out there and we get in a situation where it's a must get and we don't get it.
Dang, GoJo calling out the O-line. I know you're not happy about that.
It's one of those things, and I try and listen to so much contextually around Colorado because they're such a hot-button team, and the more I listen to that, because he was asked about more balance in the offense and if they needed that, and the more I listen to it, the less that it sounds like shade at the offensive line and more just a reality of, hey, we're built to do one thing, and that's throw the ball on this offense. Like, we don't really do the rest of that. We haven't prioritized the rest of that. We're out here to throw the football, and so why would we go and focus on running when that's not something we've put time, effort, or energy into? It comes off as a slight in the O-line, and that's on him. He's got to be more aware of the way his comments are perceived and take care of that position group that's struggling right now, but they're his teammates, and we already had to deal with the Travis Hunter comments about them while they were playing the EA Sports college football game before that came out, and so there's a heightened sense of awareness around this stuff. It doesn't sound great towards the offensive linemen, but the more and more I listened to it, it just seemed like an admission that, man, we're a one-trick pony when it comes to the offense, and we saw going up against a more complete team in Nebraska how that worked out for them.
Yeah, I mean, he can come across as an I-me guy at times, but I agree with you. The more you listen to this, the more it was talking about the reality of the situation. We can't run. And Deion saying we've got to figure out how to establish a run. Well, how the hell are you going to do that? I mean, you're not. You're not. You have the players you have. The starters for a reason. You're not going to bring in the backup offensive line and have them do any better. You revamped your offensive line twice now, and it didn't work either time as far as protection. So there needed to be more done in the offseason whether it was bringing in the freshman O-linemen or portal guys to be run blockers and not just pass blockers, and establish more of a run game and put that more as a priority in your offense. But when you have Travis Hunter and you have Shedeur who can throw the ball all over the place, you're going to pass the ball more. They didn't put enough into the running. So to expect them to establish the run, it's not going to happen. And you're right, Shedeur was just basically being realistic, saying we don't have it. We when we need to run and get a couple of yards, we can't do it. So what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, you are what you rep. Like, that's the reality with football. There's stories about Peyton Manning getting into the Super Bowl with the Broncos and all of a sudden wanting to audible at halftime and go more of a ground and pound, and the O-line looking at him like, we haven't done this all year. We're not going to be able to do this in the most important game of the season. And you're right, personnel-wise, listen, the way Colorado's gone about this also, I saw Jeff Schwartz talking about this the other day, former Oregon and NFL offensive lineman. This is a position you can't really wholesale portal. Too much of it needs continuity. Too much of it needs reps together for a position that's got to be 5 guys working together as one more than any group on the field. And so, yeah, when you combine that method of team building with a group that also is, I'm sure, and listen, I'd be curious if someone on Colorado or associated with them wants to prove me wrong and say, hey, we repped a ton of inside run in training camp and made this a part of our offense, be my guest, because it hasn't shown up yet. And so until further notice, I'm going to assume you are what you've repped. And that gets you to 23 of 38 for 244, 1 touchdown, and 5 sacks. And Dad, the only reason it wasn't more is because Shedeur is a good enough player to mitigate some of those sacks as they come in for self-preservation alone. Because you could say a lot about the comments. For the player, Shedeur Sanders, I got a lot of respect because that dude is back there getting his ass kicked again this season the way that he was last year. That guy takes a lot of hits. And the irony of all of this is I went back and watched this game because I didn't get to see it in real time. And Nebraska defensively, understandably, their front seven, as advertised coming off the offseason. Big, strong, coordinated. They were in the backfield almost every play, showing and touching up Shedeur Sanders. On the other side of the football, Dad, the Colorado defense, like, listen, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but that was a group that at least played together, fought for 4 quarters, competed their asses off, seemed like there was some semblance of cohesiveness amongst that unit, and made some plays at points throughout that game that gave their offense a bit of a chance. I was stunned watching that side of the ball as someone that hadn't seen a ton of Colorado early this season yet. To actually sit down and digest it, I looked and said, oh, the defense actually kind of looks like, especially relative to last year. Like, I called 2 of their games last year, and I can assure you the defense didn't look anywhere close to that. So that side of the ball get much less of the focus because it doesn't have Shedeur Sanders there. Actually looked like the one that had its stuff together going against Dylan Raiola, who, listen, has been great so far, was 23 of 30 for 185 and a touchdown. To further Shedeur's point, doesn't need to go out there and be all-world yet because he can hand the ball off in that offense.
Right. I mean, let's look at Nebraska. They're sitting there 2-0. They're in the top 25. They play, I think, Northern Iowa this week. But Raiola, has thrown the ball 57 times, but he's completed 73% of them, 3 touchdowns, hasn't turned the ball over yet. And he's a true freshman. So you start to wonder about Nebraska. They were thought of as maybe a surprise team in the Big Ten this year. And listen, in a limited sample size and with a true freshman quarterback, they're showing pretty well.
It'll be interesting for them, like their schedule pretty backloaded. You get to the back half of the season. Like you mentioned, they got Northern Iowa, Illinois coming up, Purdue, Rutgers. But starting in late October, on the road at Ohio State, on the road at USC, and on the road at Iowa to end the season, which I get it. They just lost the Cy Hawk Trophy, but that defense at Iowa still going to be salivating seeing a freshman who by then, listen, I heard it from both coaching staffs that I had. By that point in the season, if you're Dylan Raiola and you've been starting from week 1, when you get to that point at the end of the season, every coach will tell you, you're not a freshman anymore. You've been playing right now. You got experience. We expect you to go out there and perform. But he still is a freshman going on the road to those environments. Their 3 toughest games, all road games, going to be the difference between, hey, this is going to be a bowl team this year. This is going to be a big improvement for Matt Rule in the way we all expected in year 2. But that's going to be the ceiling, is what they can do once they're challenged in those environments. And I have a feeling, Dad, that could be an 0-3 stretch for them.
So, So you look at the bottom of the top 25, Nebraska 23, Boston College, Jesse, are sitting there at 24 at 2-0. And Northern Illinois, congrats to them. They got into the top 25 after going to South Bend and again, beating Notre Dame. They played better than Notre Dame, and they got rewarded for being in the rankings. So good for them.
Yeah, I guess. Congratulations, Northern Illinois.
You have to.
No, they did it.
Give
Listen,
credit where it's due.
I'll give credit where it's due. I'm just still really sad. So coming up next, I'm going to focus on the one thing I know we can do well in South Bend, academics. We're going to hand out some GPAs for college football's top performers next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. More college football to get to right now. We're learning more with each game, right? So let's introduce a little GPA, as in Golic playoff analysis. Okay, let's start with one team that has potential but is underperforming right now.
I have a sense of relief, because of the result, but again, try to focus on the process. And there's a lot of things that I think that we can go attack and fix. And there's certainly some things to fix, right? There's certainly some things to improve. I thought offensively we did a better job, in the second half of being able to move the ball. I think we really started off really slow. We got to figure out the cause of that and make sure that that doesn't become the case for us. But we'll figure that out, right? That's our job as coaches. That's our job as players, for every one of these guys to go to work.
Okay, so let's give them a score. 4.0 being the highest GPA. What's the Ducks GPA after week 2?
Yeah, Dad, I mean, probably at this point, like a 2.5, right? Like, they've managed to get by here. They're not going to be academically ineligible, but it's certainly not been what we expected going in the year. We expected them to be an honor student. I expected them to be a team both competing for and winning the Big Ten, and so far, they've looked like anything but capable of that. Offensively, especially, Dad, I think has been the most shocking. The offensive line has really had some struggles with that group relative to expectation and where they've been in prior years. Dylan Gabriel, it hasn't been the offensive explosion that I think a lot of us did. But also, I mean, you look at this last game, Ashton Genty, who is that kind of player, but ran all over them a week after he had 6 touchdowns against Georgia Southern, 25 carries, 192 yards, and 3 scores in this game against an Oregon defense that also has been deep and big up front in the front 7 in areas you think would make that not an issue.
Now, Genty's going to run a lot on a lot of people. I mean, so he's legitimately, we'll see if he gets any love for the Heisman. I don't think he'll get as much as certainly the team would like to see, but he's going to get his yards. There is no doubt about it. I would give Oregon a C+ just for the fact that they won their games. They just survive in advance. And after Notre Dame's game, and you and I being Notre Dame people, we see what happens when you don't. So just stay in the win column, They have not performed very well. They play Oregon State, UCLA, and Michigan State before they face Ohio State. So they have a few more games to kind of get into the B grade. And then obviously if they were to win those games, get into the B grade and then take care of Ohio State, they would be back in with the apple to the teacher and getting an A. So they have a chance to build their GPA up in the next few weeks before they have that really, really, really difficult midterm against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think Ohio State's more of like a pass-fail, right? Now, maybe this season with a 12-team playoff, that binary probably doesn't exist as much as it would have in the past, but it certainly feels like that's going to be the measuring stick game all of a sudden, because that's who they were expected to come in and compete with before the season. So, yeah, Oregon's been one of the true surprises in the early going here, and again, it's not just what happened this last week, only a 24-14 win over Idaho the week before, and just relative to the massive expectation for that team. Who else, Dad, would you say is in the category of needs improvement? Because I look at a team like Penn State, and I say for them, I'm still looking for growth, but it's going to come in places I think they're capable of, because the offense that we've seen, and we talked about Andy Kotelnicki going over from Kansas as the offensive coordinator there with Drew Aller at quarterback, has looked about like what I've expected, where, hey, Drew Aller looked even more comfortable this week than he did last week. Their tight end has been sensational for that team. Tyler Warren set a program record for single game receiving yards by a tight end with 146 in this last game. So the things offensively have been there. Tom Allen takes over as the defensive coordinator as Manny Diaz leaves for a head coaching job, and that group struggled tackling. There's always been a lot of talent there. I think that's going to get better. They're the one, Dad, I'm probably most inclined to look at the week 2 result and say, hey, blip on the radar against Bowling Green. I'm expecting a lot of improvement going forward from these guys.
Yeah, I would give them a solid B just for the fact that they only beat Bowling Green by 7 points, but they did take care of West Virginia in the opening weekend in that weather-delayed game. They did struggle a bit against Bowling Green, but we saw other teams do it as well and again get the win. So they have Kent State, they have Illinois, they have UCLA, like 3 teams that we talked about with Oregon, and then they have a pretty good midterm against USC. So we'll see where USC is in a few weeks, but USC has been playing better than we had thought. They're sitting there at 2-0 and number 11, while Penn State is number 9. So they have a few weeks to tinker with their grade a little bit before they get to their midterm.
Yeah, USC is going to be the fascinating one to keep an eye on going forward here, too. They're on the road playing Michigan, not this weekend, but next weekend. They've got the bye this weekend after a 48-0 drubbing of Utah State. So, once again, and this was, man, shoe on the other foot a couple of months ago as we talked about USC coming into the season, and would they be good enough along the lines of scrimmage to go out and be able to perform in these environments? I don't know if LSU's defense was necessarily going to be the right test. That one, like USC's defense, came into this season with a lot of question marks about their production based off 2023. For Michigan, there's going to be no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If USC can go out there and execute the way they did against that Michigan defense, then all of a sudden that's going to raise a few eyebrows there. And on the other side, Dad, USC's defense had looked clean enough through the first couple of games with D'Antlin over there that now them against that Michigan offense becomes a really interesting test because, again, I'll go back. Davis Warren, that quarterback, has not looked comfortable in obvious passing situations. And while you want to maintain options and stay on schedule and all that stuff, eventually everyone in the stadium is going to know at some point, hey, we're running here, hey, we're passing here. And while we know Michigan's been able to run the rock in the past, that difference of J.J. McCarthy there now to Davis Warren and the comfort level executing in those situations, albeit against Texas, who's one of the two best teams in football, concerning to say the least. So we're a couple of weeks from that one where that would be the real siren sounding, because if USC were to come in year one in the Big Ten and all of a sudden come to the big house and shock them in a way that feels a lot more possible than when we started this season, that would all of a sudden, I think, have the locals in Ann Arbor a little worried.
I don't think it'll be a shock. I think USC is going to win that game. I just think Michigan is too down. They're relying certainly on their defense. Now, USC is not the team Texas is. I don't think it'll be that much of a drubbing, but I definitely think USC is going to win that game. USC, one of the few undefeated and ranked teams that really took care of business in week 2 against a smaller school, beating Utah State 48-0. And as you mentioned, had that bye before Michigan. I fully expect USC to go into Michigan. And listen, Michigan's still living off the national championship. That's going to be a down year for them. It's definitely going to be a down year for them, I feel. I think they lose this game to USC, but, it's only last year that they won the title, so you have a bit of a cushion.
All right, let's talk about some better grades, some passing grades, and we already mentioned it. Dad, I truly think Ashton Genty's got a chance to be a guy that gets invited to New York, just based on what the trajectory for this team season is supposed to be. A little bit of a shootout with Georgia Southern the other week. That was a game that Georgia Southern and Clay Helton absolutely had a chance to contend in late. But Ashton Genty, 6 touchdowns later in that game. And then to go on the road now. And it was interesting when we talked to Clay Helton. I called Georgia Southern's game against Nevada this last weekend. And we asked him, for Clay Helton, who had been at USC for over a decade and who's been a part of a lot of these conversations from the Power 4 level, about what it's going to take for a group of 5 team in the 12-team playoff to be able to crack into that group more often than not. And he said, you've got to do special things. You've got to schedule tough, and you've got to go out in those moments and have a big impact. For Boise State, they might not need that help because, again, the highest-ranked Group of 5 conference champion automatically gets into the dance, and they're the Mountain West favorite. They're a team that's looked like that so far through 2 games. But when it comes to the Heisman as well, I think maximizing the eyes on you in big matchups like this is another thing that Ashton Genty did. Again, 25 carries, 192, so almost 200 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns in this game. He's got the 10th best odds to win the Heisman. He's the top non-quarterback right now. And I think, Dad, if they're a team we're talking about in the college football playoff hunt down the stretch, and he keeps putting up numbers like this against competition that, no disrespect to the rest of the Mountain West that I'm excited to cover this year, in the Oregon Ducks, then I think we're going to be talking about a guy that at the very least gets that plane ticket to New York.
I agree, and I hope so, because you know me, the Heisman to me is they've made it a quarterback award, and I would love to see a non-quarterback win this thing. To me, one of the biggest passing grades is got to be Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee is just, Josh Heupel leading that offense, just annihilating teams. Chattanooga 69-3 and North Carolina State 51-10. I mean, they take on Kent State this week, and then they play Oklahoma, who I while they're ranked, I think is definitely down this year. Then Arkansas, then Florida, and then they play Alabama. They have Georgia later in the year, but they are absolutely on fire right now on the offensive side of the ball.
Yep, and that's something maybe the reason we're less surprised is, one, because of the opponent so far, but two, because Josh Heupel, this has become the standard for him offensively. We expect that, and with blips like last year where, hey, Joe Milton with all this ability just can't put it together in the same way that Nico is now and that we saw quarterbacks do before him. I do think maybe we've become a little bit nose blind to the fact that Tennessee has the capability year in and year out with this coaching staff to come in and put up video game numbers time and time again. Dad, the other team I want to shout out, my old partner Anish Shroff, one of many Syracuse alums in sports media, that Syracuse team and Kyle McCord in the Dome against the Georgia Tech team that had been the darling of week 0 of college football, beating Florida State over in Ireland. They come back and win again. They're ranked in the top 25, and it's gone behind Kyle McCord, who now, Dad, listen to his first 2 games of the season. The first one against Ohio, 27 of 39, 354 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. This last week at home against Georgia Tech, 32 for 46, 381 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Made some plays with his feet. This is a guy, Dad, that only went over 300 yards last year at Ohio State, where he had Marvin Harrison Jr. and all of these great players around him and an offense coordinated by Ryan Day. He only went over 300 yards 3 times all of last season, and he's done it the first 2 games by a comfortable margin here. Kyle McCord looks comfortable, and Fran Brown has this team confident. They were physical with Georgia Tech. I thought the most telling note with them, Dad, was Fran Brown after the game made a point of bringing up. Brent Key was asked about this game in the lead-up and said, it's not going to be an X's and O's game. This is about going and playing physical for 4 quarters. And Fran Brown did the Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, manufacture a chip thing where he turned that into a slight against the Northeast. He turned that into Brent Key somehow insinuating that Syracuse wasn't tough and said, you can't give me ammo like that before the game because I am going to use it. Fran Brown has brought a swagger to this program that so far through 2 games has translated onto the field with Syracuse.
Yeah, he really has. And Kyle McCord, we all kind of scratched our head on why he left Ohio State, and obviously, NIL reasons, writing on the wall reasons. But boy, he has been great for that team. And you're right, all you need is a little extra motivation when you can pull it off against another team like they did against Georgia Tech, holding their quarterback to 11 carries for just 35 yards. I mean, They did a job. So I always love to see kind of the unexpected teams make that jump, especially early in the season. We'll see. It's a long season, and a lot of times with teams like that, you talk about the issue of depth. When a season gets long and you start to get players nicked up, are you able to still thrive? So we'll see. But early on, thumbs up for Syracuse.
Now, they did have a field goal blocked, a punt blocked, and an onside kick recovered against them this weekend, so might want to shore up the teams. But, Dad, I'm with you. For Kyle McCord, I wasn't surprised. I figured after the season that he had, Ohio State wanted to upgrade at that position. It was in some way made clear to him, whether financially or otherwise, and he hopped in the portal. But what I didn't expect was this kind of response because, Dad, well, again, listen, the competition he's seeing here is certainly not going to be the Penn State that he saw last year, the Michigan that he saw last year, which were really the games where he was expected to go out there and perform and didn't up to the level that we've seen of Ohio State quarterbacks in the past, most recently C.J. Stroud before him, at a place that's had number 1 draft pick, top draft pick after top draft pick at that position. I was a little bit surprised that we've already gotten this much potency out of him here. He's looked exactly like a guy that was recruited to be an Ohio State quarterback and now has been playing. Like, he played against lesser competition defensively. That's no disrespect to Georgia Tech or Ohio. It's just the reality compared to the teams that I brought up. And he's looked insanely comfortable, and he has looked like he is that caliber of quarterback yet again.
Yep, they get a week off, and then next Friday they'll take on Stanford, then Holy Cross and UNLV. So let's see if they can keep the train rolling.
Yep, we will see. Again, Fran Brown got him comfortable there, but through 2 weeks of college football, starting to get some things that we think are trends. We will see if teams like Oregon, teams like Penn State can buck what we've seen and continue to climb higher and higher in the rankings as we move on.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. Rough news for the WNBA over the weekend. The Chicago Sky announced that Angel Reese will miss the remainder of the season. She was leading the league in rebounds with 13.1 a game, had a record 15 straight double-doubles this season. Tough blow for the Sky here as they are battling with the dream for the 8th playoff spot. So here is Reese on her decision to get surgery.
So, y'all know I hurt my wrist. I am out for the season. I fell on my hand when I got the M1. When I fell back, fell on my hand, and it is a small crack in my bone. Basically, the doctors told me that I could either not get surgery or have surgery. The risk of not having surgery, I could literally have arthritis at 22 years old. That wasn't an option. The bone could literally crack and literally completely shatter. Right now it's like a hairline, literally a hairline, like shatter, not even that big. But they're gonna put like a small little screw in it. And I wasn't going for it getting any bigger. And long term, I literally could have like not played anymore because my bone this is a very hard place to heal because the blood flow is like literally little to none. So.
Guys, she went on to say that basically she wants to have a long career, so she's not going to take a risk with this, and it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Especially given her physical style of play, Dad. I think this is always the question for any injury, and she sort of addressed it there is, Can you make it worse by going out there and continuing to play in a way that undermines your ability to be available for your team long term? And for Angel Reese, while they're in contention, and I'm sure the competitor and her, like most, would love to be out here helping her team try and hold on to that 8th playoff spot. She's got an understanding that, hey, this is the long game we're playing. She thinks they're building something there in Chicago, and her being healthiest long term, especially, again, for someone whose hallmark has been rebounding, going out there, working in the paint, to go out and have an injury like this that you could potentially make worse, makes understandable sense why they'd sit her down now.
Yeah, she's a double-double queen, averaging 13.1 rebounds, as Jesse said, leading the league. And there's always decisions to make. There's 5 more regular season games. They're 1 game in over the Atlanta Dream into the playoffs, which would mean they would take on the Liberty as the number 1 seed and probably lose that series. So she could technically have, 8 more games, but decided to shut it down, basically saying, listen, I don't think a lot of people think they would pull off the 8-1 upset, so just get ready for the next year. I could see it going either way. I could see it going, you try and gut it out and play the last 8 games, but you don't know if you're going to do more damage to it. You're not sure, and you're kind of looking at the future. She's a rookie with a long career ahead of her, and she's making this decision. I don't think there's a wrong decision, quite honestly, Mike, for those that you played sports, that you play through things, or sometimes you shut it down. I don't think there's a wrong answer. There's a right answer for the person involved, and she feels the right answer was to have surgery.
100%. So all you can do is support and respect that. I got to imagine for her, too, in a personal sense, while this is obviously disappointing as a competitor and as a teammate to not be available for her team, man, based off all the stuff that she's had to weather off the court this year in terms of the conversation that's followed her and Caitlin from college to the pros, there might be a nice sigh of relief and a vacation when this season is over where she can just sort of decompress from all this. She's handled the fame really well in a lot of ways, and it sounds like insanely popular around Chicago. We know an insanely marketable athlete, but has also been the subject of a lot of really ugly and demeaning conversation because of the compare-contrasting conversation surrounding her and Caitlin Clark, who, by the way, got asked about this the other day after one of her games here and had this to say about her injury and her season ending. This was Caitlin Clark on Angel Reese.
Definitely sad anytime you see anybody go down with an injury, especially people that you came into this league with, whether it was Cam, whether it was Angel, and especially Angel. Like, you want to see her finish out this year. Obviously, she's had a historic year and she's done some incredible things. And for me, like, getting to play against her, like, her motor is up there, if not the best in the league. Like, she just doesn't stop working. So, congratulations to her. I thought she had a tremendous year. And I thought she came to the league and really did what she's done well her entire career as long as I've known her. So it's definitely devastating. That's never anything you want to see from a player. And then obviously our rookie class has kind of been hit with a few more injuries than you would have liked to see. And I think, I don't know, I mean, for myself, I think just some of those things you can't avoid, especially in their two instances. Obviously, I don't know the specific details, but that's kind of what comes with basketball at times.
The consummate professional always, Caitlin Clark.
Well, I mean, and they're two, and I don't mean not a professional in Angel Reese. I agree. She's the consummate professional in how she answers, but their personalities are different, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, right? I think they both took advantage of the Olympic break, and I agree with you, Mike. I think they both will breathe a sigh of relief when the season is over of like, okay, now it can kind of chill. But Angel Reese is more outspoken. She'll give a quote. She's a little more brash than Caitlin Clark. And again, there's not a right or wrong in this, but it invites more a backlash on Angel. So you're right, mentally for Angel Reese, she hears a lot, but she's out there a lot as well. She is not afraid to speak her mind at all, which I think is a great thing as well, but she's going to get backlash for it as well, where Caitlin Clark basically is right down the middle of the road every time, never says anything that's controversial. They just approach it differently. Two great players. And again, Angel Reese, yes. Does she have her offensive game that she needs to work on? Yes. Nobody has a perfect game, or very few people, notwithstanding like Asia Wilson, you're going to be a 3-time MVP. She has to work on her offensive game. But to damn her rebounds by saying she rebounds her own misses is just a weak argument, when you could take away all those rebounds where she rebounded her own miss and she'd still be the leading rebounder. She is a dog rebounder. She is a tough rebounding player and gets double-doubles. She just has a different personality than Caitlin Clark. So two different personalities, but both I think will agree that they will, while they'll be sad you're not playing anymore for a season, they'll be happy for the break.
And for Angel, listen, there's the obvious factor that because she is a black woman, she, even if they had the same personality, would be treated and received differently by a lot of people. There have been a lot of people that have taken up on behalf of Caitlin Clark, not saying Caitlin Clark has been the impetus, the cause of this by anything she said or done, but there are people who have used her positioned against Angel Reese to say hateful, racist, misogynistic things to her because she is a black woman who in their mind has the audacity to speak out and be herself publicly in the way that she has when they are positioning her against Caitlin Clark. So that part's been unfair. It's been the ugly part of this season that we've hated to see, but unfortunately figured was probably coming because it was part of the way that they were positioned against each other in college. We've talked again, thankfully, towards the back half of the season, it's dissipated some to become more about the basketball conversation. But Angel's game also, because she's not as offensively proficient, is going to invite a lot of that criticism as well that we'll see as time goes on. And obviously, as she gets more comfortable as a player, like both of them came into the league, Dad, and did the things they did extremely well right off the jump. Angel as a rebounder, and Caitlin really as a passer before the scoring took over, and we've watched them both settle in, like you said, after that break. I'd have to imagine that jump from year 1 to year 2 also going to provide them that time to stop, take a breath, and finally, I mean, they came right off their college seasons into the W season. Right. They've got to be exhausted, and so it gives them a chance, both physically, mentally, and with their game, to kind of reload, rest, and retool.
Yeah, they both have great games in what they do. With Caitlin scoring, she's 8th in the league in scoring, number 1 in assist, and Angel Reese with her physical play. They both have their faux pas. Angel's offensive side isn't the best, and Caitlin turns the ball over. Now, again, she tries to pass the ball a lot, but with that comes turnovers. So no perfect games here. Both have things to work on, but both are incredibly great players who went into the WNBA and made their marks early on in their careers.
Yeah, an almost impossible task given the popularity that they had coming from college, given what was expected of them, the commentary around rookies with their profile coming into this league. And credit to both young women and to really a lot of the young women that have come into the W. Before she was hurt, Cameron Brink was in this conversation, who seemed ready for the moment in a way that someone who was, at one point a young person not that long ago, really, really impressed by then and now. So we hope Angel Reese has a speedy recovery. We look forward to seeing her back on the court. Coming up next, we got to say goodbye to an all-time legend that left us yesterday. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, Vizio, Watch Free Plus, Google TV, Sling Free Stream. We're a bunch of places now. That's pretty cool. Find us in all those spots. Tell somebody else to watch us in those spots. That kicks ass. And if you miss us or any of our great guests live in those places, like Charlotte Wilder, the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, who stopped by in hour number 1 with us, you can get that wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. And guys, let's get to this. Sad news yesterday. Now, a full life lived, but nonetheless, a sad loss for all of us, as famed actor James Earl Jones passes away at the age of 93. Dad, James Earl Jones, whose IMDb page is littered with historic roles, both in the voice acting realm, in The Lion King, and as Darth Vader in those movies, but also Coming to America, Field of Dreams, The Sandlot. The list goes on and on. He's got the non-competitive EGOT because his Academy Award was an honorary award, but Dad, a guy whose acting chops, ability, and the roles that he played, I know we're going to stick with so many people for a long time, us included.
No more known voice than James Earl Jones' voice.
Yes.
And I think the voice of Mufasa from Lion King, the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars, just absolutely iconic. I loved him as the blind neighbor in The Sandlot. I thought he was great. Field of Dreams as Terrence Mann. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, just role after role after role. But one of the most iconic voices, maybe the most iconic voice we have ever heard.
It does. It booms in a way that, I never got to see James Earl Jones on the stage, where, again, an EGOT, for anyone unfamiliar, is an Emmy, a Grammy, on a Tony, and then an Academy Award, an Oscar. To see him on the stage with that booming voice had to be such a presence. You felt him every step of the way. And you're right. There are people that probably don't even know, especially I'm sure younger people now, that just see and hear Darth Vader's voice rendered in so many different places, see old clips of Star Wars movies, and have no idea, because he's obviously not pictured there, that's James Earl Jones and that breathy, modulated, booming voice that's become one of the most iconic villains in film history. So I'm with you. For me, I'm with the Sandlot role, and then, man, King Jaffe Joffer from Coming to America. Just overall, that movie's a gem and a classic. But James Earl Jones, one of the perfect fatherly figures in almost any movie that he was depicted in, and someone who was, I don't know, you just knew what you were getting every time he was on screen, and it was an absolute joy.
93. I mean, a life well lived, without question.
Yeah, sign me up for that. That sounds good.
Yeah. I think certainly any of us would there, but to do it as full and as rich and in a way that's going to resonate with so many people. I think all of us that get into anything that's relatively performance based in terms of profession, you all have grand dreams. We all have grand dreams of doing something that's impactful enough to leave behind that maybe people will miss. And man, James Earl Jones did a whole lot of that. So again, thoughts and prayers to his family, but what an incredibly full and rich life. Jesse, no easy transition, but let's get on to that and go back to some more normal news here in the day.
Netflix. Okay. Netflix is going in on sports. Okay. Full swing. We're getting new Untold docs, right? Including the gun incident with Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenden. We're getting a documentary series on the 2004 Boston Red Sox and their comeback against the Yankees. But most importantly, we are getting Aaron Rodgers, the Enigma. Here's a snippet.
There's a common thread on some the greatest players that I've taken care of. Him, Kobe, Brady. They all have a belief in themselves. Sometimes it's a belief that their own body doesn't follow the normal rules of anatomy or physics or biology. And that's not always healthy, but if you can corral that a little bit, I think that it can work in a positive way.
Listen, I believe in the power of prayer and intention. And from the first night this happened, hours after that, I was surrounded by a bunch of really special people in my life. And we just laid down a lot of prayers.
What was the foot?
What?
Who was holding the foot?
What was that?
I know, that's a great tease. I want to know who was holding the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that somebody who didn't want to be identified, but they're holding the foot?
Yeah.
Caressing the foot, I'd say.
Yeah, it
that's
was
very
weird.
Gentle, very tender.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to definitely be watching this because it's going to be weird.
Yeah, he says a lot of things that are non-football related that obviously he's very, very hot buttony.
Well, it's going to be one of those things. All of these Netflix documentaries end up being puff pieces for the people that are willing to sit for them. That's become the pretty clear through line. And until Netflix does something to disprove that in terms of the content of these docuseries, that's kind of what I'm going to assume. And so while I want to get excited, and Full Swing's been great. Like, you want to talk about, I know plenty of people in my life who have come to golf because of seeing that show. It's exactly what they were hoping for coming off of Drive to Survive and the popularity of that translating into this game. So that's going to work. The 04 Red Sox is one of those perfect examples where there's nothing really salacious that I can remember about that team that I'm going to be dying for here, but it's the story of one of the most impactful teams in the history of an important franchise, and it's from a long time ago. Like Aaron Rodgers, this happened last year. We did all of this. It'll actually be kind of fun to relive the 04 Red Sox nostalgia a bit, as opposed to this now dad popular trend to basically turn a documentary out of things that just happened that we just lived through. There's no space to actually miss what went on.
And it seems anything that's controversial, you're not going to get a good show, right?
Right.
Like Full Swing was behind the scenes of golf. Drive to Survive behind the scenes of F1. 04 Red Sox will be behind the scenes of that. There's nothing, oh no about that. but anything where there's some controversy involved, you want to watch it to hear the controversy, but you don't. So I'll definitely still pick and choose on my Netflix.
And I think with Aaron Rodgers especially, we know a lot of this isn't going to involve football. This is going to be about his road to recovery, which is going to be of interest to some. And again, what he did last year in terms of even getting back onto the practice field that late in the season, otherworldly. But we also know based on what we've seen of Aaron Rodgers publicly, this is going to be probably another avenue for him to get out what he believes are controversial opinions that people need to hear. And this is going to be the latest place that happens. So speaking of controversy, Jesse, let's get to the third. I was not prepared for this one.
Yeah, so Australian breaker Ray Gunn, who, had that incident at the Olympics, according to the World Dance Sport Federation, is now the #1 breakdancer in the world. So she failed to register a single point in the Olympics, but she's been catapulted to the top of the ranks thanks to the 1,000 points she claimed for winning the WDSF Oceania Championship, which is what booked her a spot to the Olympics. Now, the 3 women who took home medals at the Olympics are not on the list. So I don't know what's going on here. They need to rework the point system or something because the points aren't pointing.
It just goes to show that the WDSF Oceania Championship is a joke.
Oh, yeah.
All right? Just like Reagan dancing at the Olympics was a joke.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you want your sport to be taken seriously, and they do, this is not the way to go about doing it. This is to continue to make your sport sound like a laughing stock rather than those that are actually working hard in the sport. And listen, the sport didn't take over. It's not going to be back. It was a complete wash. And Ray Gunn, unfortunately, was a big part of that. But if you as a sport want it to get taken seriously, you have to do way the hell better than what's going on right now.
I'm just very interested. I went on their website looking at the other list of athletes on here and then found the anti-doping tab. Like, has there been a doping scandal in breaking that I've missed where all of a sudden we would need to improve this? This does not seem like, I guess it is incredibly physically taxing. So I guess a roided up breakdancer might be something that's on the table. I don't know. We'll try and figure that out. If you have any information on roided up breakdancers, let us know in the comments as you download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, and all those other places. Have a good one. Maybe go check out Ray Gunn. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.